Look at your life right now. Your plans, your finances, your ambitions, your private struggles. Now ask yourself one honest question. Who knows about all of it? Because here is the reality most people refuse to examine. The people who have access to the most detailed map of your life are usually the people closest to you. And in the architecture of power, proximity without boundaries is not intimacy. It is vulnerability. This is not an argument against family. It is not a call to coldness or ingratitude. It is an examination of a specific dynamic that plays out in households, at dinner tables, during holiday gatherings, in quiet phone calls. A dynamic so normalized that most people never identify it as the mechanism it actually is. The people who love you most are often, without any conscious malice, the people most capable of keeping you exactly where you are. Machiavelli's understanding of human nature was built on a refusal to flatter it. He observed that people act from interest and from fear, not primarily from virtue, not consistently from love, but from these two more reliable and more honest motivations. This does not make your family your enemies. It makes them human. And understanding the human dynamic that operates inside families, the specific ways that love becomes limitation, that concern becomes control, that transparency becomes a liability, is the first step toward protecting what matters most, your trajectory. There are 5 categories of information that most people share freely with the people closest to them, believing that closeness demands openness, that family loyalty earns full access, that sharing is the same as connecting. What Machiavelli would observe about each of these is that the sharing accomplishes the opposite of what is intended. It does not strengthen the relationship. It introduces a dynamic that neither party fully understands, and that, over time, costs the person who disclosed more than they ever anticipated. The first category is the one that most directly restructures every relationship the moment it is disclosed. Your precise financial position. The moment you tell the people in your immediate world exactly what you earn, exactly what you have, exactly what your financial trajectory looks like, you stop being a person in their minds and become a calculation. Not out of greed. The vast majority of families are not consciously predatory, but out of the basic human psychology that Machiavelli understood with precision. When someone knows you have a surplus, their own deficit becomes harder to sit with without reference to you. The gap between your abundance and their need is no longer abstract. It has a number. And that number reorganizes the emotional architecture of every interaction that follows. Consider what actually happens in the period after a financial disclosure within a family. The first thing that changes is the texture of requests. What might have been a speculative conversation, "I'm not sure how I'm going to handle this expense," becomes a more direct one, because the person making the request now knows that you have the capacity to solve the problem. Your number is no longer a financial statement, it is a choice. And choices can be argued with, guilted over, and returned to in subsequent conversations. You have, without realizing it, converted every financial boundary you subsequently attempt to set into a moral question, rather than a practical one. Machiavelli wrote that men forget the death of their father sooner than the loss of what they consider theirs. The human relationship with money is not rational. It does not respond to logical explanations about investment strategies or long-term planning. It responds to proximity and to perceived fairness. When your family knows what you have, their intuitive sense of family equity, the tribal understanding that abundance is meant to be shared, positions your financial decisions as community decisions. Every purchase you make after disclosure will be evaluated against the uses of that money they could have proposed. Every saving will be positioned as potential generosity withheld. This is not the environment in which wealth is built. Wealth is built in private, with a discipline that privacy makes possible. The moment your financial life becomes a community document, the decisions that compound over years into genuine financial security become subject to a committee that did not earn a seat at the table and does not share the risk of the decisions being made. Keep your financial position private, not with hostility, with a simple, consistent redirection that signals that the subject is not available for discussion. You are doing fine. Things are stable. Beyond that, the ledger is closed. Not because you are hiding failure, but because you are protecting the conditions in which success compounds. The second category is the one that costs people the most, in the specific currency of momentum. Your plans before they are executed. There is a particular kind of excitement that accompanies a genuine breakthrough in your thinking. The moment when a direction becomes clear, when a plan takes shape, when the fog lifts and you can see the path. The instinct in that moment is to share it, to bring the people you trust into the vision, to let their response confirm what you are already feeling. And the instinct is understandable. It is also, in most family contexts, one of the most reliable ways to slow down or stop the plan before it begins. The mechanism is not malice. It is something more structurally interesting. Your family has a model of you in their minds. It was built over years of observation, and it includes every failure, every abandoned project, every instance of enthusiasm that did not produce the result that was anticipated. When you present a new plan, you are presenting it to that model, to the accumulated history of everything that didn't work, filtered through the lens of people who love you enough to be genuinely afraid of watching you fail again. Their response, almost invariably, is not to engage with the plan on its actual merits. It is to engage with the risk. Are you sure about the timing? What happens if it doesn't work? Is this really the moment for something like this? These questions are not stupid questions. In many contexts, they are the right questions, but asked at the moment of conception, before the plan has had the chance to develop the kind of structural solidity that withstands scrutiny. They function as a kind of early termination. The doubt they introduce lands in exactly the cognitive space where your confidence was building, and the plan that felt inevitable an hour before now feels presumptuous, risky, naive. Machiavelli's principle here is direct. Men are moved more by immediate fears than by distant hopes. Your family's immediate fear is your potential disappointment. The distant hope, the vision of what becomes possible if the plan succeeds, is abstract to them because they have not been inside the thinking that produced it. They cannot feel what you feel about it. They can only evaluate the risk with the information they have, which is a history of attempts and the awareness of everything that could go wrong. The solution is not to share the plan earlier, or to share it more completely, or to find a better way to explain it. The solution is to not share it until the execution has already begun. Ideally, until the first results are visible. When you tell someone about a business after it has already made its first revenue, the conversation is completely different than when you tell them about the idea before you have started. Results silence the committee. Intentions invite it. Execute in private. Announce only what is already real. Let the results be the argument. The third category is the one that most directly threatens financial independence, while being the easiest to rationalize as generosity. Your additional income sources. The psychology of how families relate to supplemental income is particular and worth understanding precisely. Primary income is understood as necessary. It pays for the life that is visible, and the allocation of it is seen as fixed and constrained. Supplemental income, by contrast, is categorized differently in the minds of the people around you. It was not part of the original accounting. It appears as excess. And excess, in the tribal logic that governs family dynamics, is available. This is not about conscious exploitation. It is about the way human beings naturally think about abundance within a group. When a hunt produces more than the immediate meal requires, the surplus has always been communal. This is wired into the social architecture at a level that conscious goodwill cannot simply override. When your family becomes aware that you have income beyond what your primary life requires, their unconscious categorization of that income as available is not a moral failure. It is a predictable response to the information you have provided. The practical consequences play out in recognizable ways. The requests become more casual because the threshold of asking has been lowered. Your side income is not perceived as the disciplined, often stressful, late-night and early morning work it actually represents. It is perceived as easy money, money that arrived without the visible cost of the 40-hour week that they understand. Requests drawn against that income carry less weight because the income itself carries less perceived weight. Beyond the financial extraction, the disclosure creates a second problem: the management of your effort by people who do not understand the domain. Because your supplemental work is not seen as serious, the feedback it attracts is not serious. You're advised to be careful, not to overextend, to remember your primary responsibilities. The implicit message is that this thing you are building on the side is a hobby with ambitions, not a genuine economic activity deserving of the same respect and protection as your visible career. Build your supplemental income in private. The goals it is serving, financial independence, the ability to make choices your primary income cannot fund, the long-term security that multiple income streams provide, are served by the income, not by the disclosure of it. When the supplemental work has grown large enough to speak for itself, the results will communicate more effectively than any explanation could. Until then, the work is yours. The late nights are yours. The risk is yours. The results, when they come, will also be yours, entirely, without the tax that disclosure would have introduced. The fourth category is the most emotionally counterintuitive of the five, because the instinct to share it comes from a place that feels like authentic connection. Your struggles, sacrifices, and the actual cost of your progress. When you have worked hard to build something, when you have given up sleep, social comfort, leisure, relationships, and ease in pursuit of a goal. There is a natural human desire for that cost to be acknowledged. You want the people who know you to understand what it took. You want the sacrifice to be witnessed. And this desire is not shallow. It comes from a real need for connection, for the feeling that the people you love understand the life you are living, not just the results it eventually produces. But in the context of family dynamics, the disclosure of your struggle creates something other than the acknowledgement you are looking for. It creates leverage. Not deliberately. The leverage is usually unconscious, an automatic product of the information entering a system that is already organized around relationships of mutual obligation and debt. When you tell your family what you have sacrificed, you introduce into the accounting of family relationships a new entry. Your suffering, your cost, your deprivation in service of your goals. And family accounting, once a ledger is opened, tends to balance itself. What emerges is a subtle but persistent pressure to weigh your sacrifices against the collective sacrifice of the family, against what your parents gave up to raise you, against what your siblings have endured while you were building. Your struggle, offer as a bid for empathy, becomes a transaction. The people who received it now feel the implicit obligation to match it with their own, and the conversation that was meant to produce understanding produces instead a kind of suffering competition, in which the person with the most pain earns the most authority. There is another cost to sharing your struggles, the image it creates. Machiavelli understood that perception is not separate from power. How people see you determines how they treat you, and how they treat you determines what is possible in every interaction. When you present yourself as someone who is struggling, who is exhausted, who is paying a high price for their ambitions, you invite a particular kind of treatment. You invite management. You invite the concern that positions you as someone who needs to be guided back towards safety. The very ambition that you are working to realize becomes reframed in the minds of the people who now know how much it costs you as a dangerous pursuit that is damaging the person they love. Keep the cost of your progress private, not because the struggle is shameful, but because it is yours. It is the private capital that produces the public result. When the result arrives, let it speak without the backstory of suffering. The result, presented without the narrative of sacrifice, commands a different kind of respect than the result offered as the conclusion of a documented ordeal. One produces admiration, the other produces pity. And pity, as a foundation for how your family relates to your success, undermines every boundary and every standard that success requires you to maintain. The fifth category is the one that most people consider harmless because it concerns what is already visible. But it is the one that most directly triggers the resentment that turns admiration into obligation. The precise cost of what you own. When you acquire something significant, a home, a vehicle, an investment, a piece of property, the people around you can see that you have acquired it. The acquisition itself is not the disclosure. The disclosure is the number, and the number does something specific to every relationship it enters. It provides the unit of comparison that transforms your success from an achievement into a statement about the relative positions of everyone in the room. The human mind does not process financial information neutrally. It processes it relationally. When your family hears the cost of your home, they do not hear an abstract number. They hear it in units of their own financial reality. They hear it as a multiple of their monthly income, as a comparison to their own housing situation, as an indication of the distance between where they are and where you are. And that distance, once it has a number, generates a specific emotional response that generosity rarely resolves and that time rarely fully heals. What follows from the disclosure is not necessarily hostility. Most families are not organized around hostility. What follows is the subtle reorganization of how your decisions are evaluated. Every subsequent financial decision you make is now being evaluated against the baseline that the disclosure established. If you have the capacity for what you paid for the house, you have the capacity for other things. The number you revealed becomes the reference point against which every future request is calibrated, and every future refusal is judged. Machiavelli's instruction about reputation applies directly here. Cultivate the impression that serves your position, and manage the information that could undermine it. The impression that you are financially stable and thoughtful in your decisions is useful. The precise data that allows people to calculate your surplus, your flexibility, and the gap between your capacity and your current commitments is not information that serves you. It is information that serves the people who would make claims against that surplus. Let the lifestyle speak. The home, the vehicle, the quality of what you have built. These communicate. They do not require a price tag to communicate effectively. The number adds nothing to the impression except the opportunity for others to calculate what it cost and what else it could have bought. Keep the number private and the impression intact. Now, the larger principle that runs beneath all 5 of these categories. Privacy is not the same as secrecy. Secrecy implies that there is something to hide, something that would damage you if it were known. Privacy is a structural decision about who has earned the level of access that full disclosure represents. It is the recognition that closeness does not automatically confer the right to information, and that love, however genuine, does not eliminate the human tendencies that certain information activates. Your family loves you. That love is real, and it is worth protecting. And one of the most effective ways to protect it is to stop introducing into those relationships the specific categories of information that activate the dynamics that strain them. The financial tension that follows income disclosure. The subtle undermining that follows plan disclosure. The casual extraction that follows supplemental income disclosure. The suffering competition that follows sacrifice disclosure. The resentment arithmetic that follows asset cost disclosure. None of these dynamics are the product of bad people. They are the product of information entering a human system that responds to it in predictable ways. You do not change the dynamics by finding better people. You change them by controlling what enters the system. Machiavelli was not teaching men to mistrust the people who loved them. He was teaching men to understand human nature clearly enough to protect the relationships they valued from the dynamics that damaged them. The prince who understood how his court responded to certain kinds of information did not share that information. Not because the court was corrupt, but because the response was predictable, and the predictability could be managed. You are the architect of your own life. You are the person responsible for the trajectory that your discipline and your decisions are building. The protection of that trajectory, the maintenance of the conditions in which it can develop without interference, is not selfishness. It is stewardship of your future, of your potential, of the version of yourself that is being constructed in private, through private effort, toward private goals that will one day be visible to everyone, in the form of results that require no explanation. Let the results be the disclosure. Until then, the vault stays closed.